Well, hey there, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, and welcome to the Smite Challenger Circuit. Today, we're going to be in Europe, and we're going to be watching, I believe it was Team Joystick versus Just F6, and things are getting interesting here, and I want to say it's a little spicy overall in the EU SCC. We'll break them down a little bit more. My name's Gormizer. Right over there is Aggro, and Aggro, like I just said, Just F6, Joystick, who we're going to be watching later today. If you hang out after the SBL, Snake Hunters, and Pandemonium will be taking each other on to see who is going to be able to get. I believe for Pandemonium, it might be their first one. I can't remember the standings right off the top of my head.
Yeah, Snake Hunters Pandemonium is going to be a great game. Definitely some sets to check out with the amateur casters after SPL this week, because Snake Hunters Pandemonium is going to be a really fun set, and then the NA set tomorrow after SPL is going to be huge as well.
Snake Hunters looking to tie Elysium with a 2-0. Same thing here for Team Joystick, who is trying to get themselves a 2-0. While Pandemonium is just looking for their first win a little bit later today. Same thing can be said for Just F6 as of right now. And Just F6 is the team. Look, I think it was, I can't remember if it was last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago. It has to have been last week. This is the second week. So
yep.
I was a little rough on them because they had a game that did not stand up to what we kind of expected realistically out of them. They lost, I believe, a Gold Fury, and then didn't really put up much of a fight for the rest of that game. Game 2, they bounced back and looked a lot better. But it is the problem. I mean, this team, Aggro, I'll set it up for it, has been a team that kind of regularly has fallen towards the bottom. I mean, Phase 1, they were towards the bottom of the standings, and then they struggled to get back into the SCC. Now, it's only one loss, but it's not necessarily a precedent you want to make for yourselves.
No, it isn't. And look, it's not like this Just F6 roster is full of players that haven't been around the EU SCC scene before. I mean, you've got guys like Listemix, Toddy GR, Worst Total, Rotwin. I mean, these guys, Isotos in the mid lane, though he won't be playing for them today. These guys have been around the block when it comes to the SCC, so certainly expecting them to maybe get a better hold of the meta. You know, it takes some time once things switch up, and SCC was on a fairly lengthy break, so maybe it was just a bit of rust that they needed to shake off in week 1. But I don't think they have an easy matchup here today up against Team Joystick.
And I think it's even maybe even more difficult for them. You had mentioned Sotos there, and we've seen a couple of the highlights with the damage that Sotos is able to put out. But if I'm looking at this right, it looks like Hydraxin, potentially a sub, filling in for the mid lane today. So Just F6 maybe going to struggle, at least in that matchup, because the team that they're going up against is not going to be the easiest team to take on. A lot of people, you're probably wondering, like you're thinking about it, man, who is Team Joystick? Never heard of these guys. They're new to the SCC, I'll tell you that. They did fight the same way to get here as Just F6. They went through the relegations process. The difference is that Just F6 was fighting to get back in, whereas Joystick was coming from the SOC and fighting to secure their own spot. Not only that, but they managed to do it. They were the only new team that actually joined the SCC here in Phase number 2. And there's some good names on there. I think Sap was one that stood out to me when we did relegations. It was somebody that I'd never really heard of too often, but played very well. But when you're surrounded by players like Calvin, who we've seen a little more often than not this year, Echrome, who we saw a lot last year,
yep.
Mogao, who has been just star-studded in the SCC for as long as you can imagine, and of course some fresh jungler they picked up, some no-name like Cherio. I've never heard of it.
Oh, I have. Cherio is like one of the best junglers in the SPL last year.
Oh yeah, that guy.
And the year before that.
And I think the year before that.
And the year before that as well.
And maybe
right.
Before that.
Cherio definitely a long-standing SPL career. I believe reunited with Mogao back from their old Elevate days back in season 3.
That's a deep reach.
That they played together. That was my first season casting. I remember casting that team. And look, Cherio, you would just expect him to come in and look really good at this level. That's all there really is to it. You don't need to stress too much about what else is going to be going on around you, because you've got a guy like Cherio in the jungle for you who's going to be able to set the tone. He's a leader. He's going to go with his own style of play, but that seems to fit in with Team Joystick. I mean, I'm seeing a Mogao highlight. The only reason I know it's not from Season 3, it's because it's on this map, because it's Kumbhakarna solo. The guy is a maniac. He still plays that? Are you kidding?
Yeah.
I'm immediately.
He won with it.
I'm sure he did. Kumbhakarna, Hades, and Odin. Those are the Mogao gods, and Odin's actually good right now. So if I'm Just F6, give me an Odin ban here.
And I'm actually, again, excited to see this team because of the way they've put things together. Echrome stood out to me very well last year, but when you've got weird picks coming from Mogal, you've got Cherio now all of a sudden to worry about. It opens up the conversation to be maybe a little more, again, just troublesome at the start for Just F6. We'll see how they're going to handle it. They are going to be your first pick team. And you had mentioned it, Aggro, but specific bans are almost necessary. Merlin wasn't one of the ones that we covered, but Merlin is not a bad ban. Sap, I haven't seen what their god pool is like, but anything you can do to limit any of these players is at least a step in the right direction.
Agreed. I mean, Merlin, one of those gods that we see a lot of players just get very comfortable on. He's been a premier mage for some time now, so if that's a god that you feel like Sap is really going to cause you problems, I like Merlin bans towards the top. But you also have to worry about Tiamat and Morgan Le Fay when it comes to mid laners, and with something like a Heimdall ban now, as we say every week with the SCC, their meta significantly different than the SPL meta, and then the meta between the EU SCC and the NA SCC is very, very different. So, it might surprise some people, the bans we're seeing, but maybe it's just those comfort picks on the other side.
Well, on any normal day, I'd say this is going to be an Artemis, but we'll see after what it ends up being. Morgan Le Fay, Tiamat makes sense. Ultimately, you're trying to strip Just F6 of any potency. We'll see what they lock in for it. I believe, it is the Artemis. I believe it was either 2 days ago that we were talking about how that there had been no Artemis at all in any of it. They just decided to not look for any picks on this, what is the top tier hunter right now. So back on the other side, though, you have to imagine gives her a little bit of trouble as long as he doesn't get caught in a trap going for the plot.
Right, that is a bit of a scary prospect. Odin, gotta be Odin. Like, if I've got Mogal on my team and Odin is as good, okay, I go Hachiman instead, even though they already have their hunter going.
That's a good duo lane.
Yeah, it's a fine duo lane. I just can't, they lock in Artemis. If I'm Mogal, I'm like screaming, give me Odin in this spot, and Just F6 is the team to get it. Very surprised, but at the same time, he's so used to playing Odin.
Yeah.
Maybe he has a counter matchup lined up.
I can think of 2 really good gods I maybe don't want to play into Odin. It's something like a Sobek, Hachiman, both of which can't really get out of that cage. Phantom maybe just rising in terms of stock prices as of right now. Loki's going to be a little hit or miss on that one. Still a little more consistent. We've kind of seen him fall off as of late. A couple of players really have made a note on this pick and have forced him to be a ban, but for most games, he's just kind of hovering in the back minds of everybody. Like, okay, yeah, we could pick him up, but do we?
Yeah, it seems like that's the pick here for Cherio, and if you want to give Cherio the ball, so to speak, let him be the guy for your team and try and carry you through this one. That doesn't upset me. I want Cherio to be one of those guys, but he normally plays either the initiation gods like the Erlang Shen or the hard carry gods like the Kali. Loki definitely more like Kali. We'll see how much it fits the playstyle here for Cherio.
Well, the Cthulhu, and it's one of those things, if it weren't for the fact that Cthulhu is very bad as support, I would say that we could end up seeing Mogal take Sobek over to the solo lane, but I expect this is a pickup for Mogal. And ultimately, look, what was it? The Merlin first ban, Baba Yaga, the Morrigan, so a lot of mid-focused bans from Just F6. And we can see that Team Joystick are waiting patiently to grab that up last. Soul gets locked in after that Cthulhu. And they're also going to grab themselves the Camazots. We saw, I think, some of the only highlights, not just from, I think, Just F6, but also specifically from oh my god, I just blanked on Worst Turtle's name. There it is.
Happens to the best of us.
So, Worst Turtle, who has been playing this, I think, a lot more as of late.
Yeah, I like the draft here for Just F6. I was in love with the draft in the top 3. Artemis, Odin, Terra.
That's a good.
That's insane. Your team fight is nearly unstoppable, and I really wanted to see them lean into that team fight identity with these last 2 picks. And the Soul, fine. I'm not in love with it. It doesn't offend me. The Camazots, I would have liked to see a little bit more CC out of the jungler, but I'm just kind of a Camazots jungle hater because I really don't like having no CC in my jungle. But it's fine, and as you said, it's a comfort pick for Worst Turtle. So overall, I think Just F6 came away with a very, very strong draft. And when I look at what Joystick has, they are much more pick-oriented with the Sobek and the Loki. It's really on Mogal's shoulders and Mogal's shoulders alone in order to carry them through team fights, because I think Just F6 has a significantly better team fight composition than Team Joystick.
Well, a couple of good strifes can change the tide of anything, but like you said, maybe he needs the setup from someone like let's call him Cthulhu, to make sure things go their way. Can be hectic. Fallen off here in Season 8 compared to what we saw in Season 7. But Cthulhu is still very chaotic in the middle of a team fight. As you can see there, it's still me, it's still Aggro that are going to be casting this. Doug, who's going to be giving us the view. And this is where things get, again, a little more interesting to me. Cherio, you have to imagine, I'm going to call it the adapting effect, where, you go down to the SCC, you're one of the better junglers that we've seen in the SPL. And I think he had even said it, not on Twitter, but I believe it was he was filling in for Hazer on Hazer's stream at one point watching the SPL. And he had said that if he can, when he is done with those obligations that have taken him to Egypt, he would love to join back into the SPL. And so maybe this is just to try and keep him warm over the next couple of years so he can bounce back.
Yeah, keep his hands warm and make sure he doesn't lose it. And look, Cherry's most valuable aspect, in my mind, is not his hands pressing the buttons. It's the way that he thinks about the game and can contribute to a team in that way. So if I were him, he's definitely doing the right thing, keeping his hands warm and coming down here and playing with Team Joystick and training up some other players to make it. I mean, guys like Sap and Calvin, who are a little bit newer to the competitive scene, for my knowledge at the very least, I think is a really good spot for him, because if these guys are getting a chance to learn from Cherio, I'd be very excited if I were in their shoes.
And it has to be pointed out just for a second time, because I think it is worth mentioning that Just of 6 are not playing with Sodos, their typical mid laner, which makes things just, again, maybe more comfort-oriented. You get that soul, and I think, okay, yeah, she's pretty safe. She got good survivability in and of herself. And it makes sense that if you have someone that you're not maybe too sure of, or at least the team synergy, you're going to have to be a little worried about. Something that you want to be safe on. Speaking of safety, Cherio is in a little bit of danger. No mana, but a little bit of invisibility. There are 3 members looking for him. He's just out of range for Hydraxin, but the leap is going to be able to get it here. Lestimix gets the first blood as Cherio gets a little greedy in the jungle.
Hey, even though it's not the SPL and the SCC instead, Cherry's still going to try and steal your back camps. He's the back camp bandit, for God's sakes. That's what he's known for. So it's smart from Just Have 6 to be on time for their back harpies, and immediately they find Cherio without Blink. And without Blink, Cherry doesn't really have the mobility to get away from a character like Odin or from like Camazotz. So ends up being first blood and sets him far behind, which is definitely not the plan for Joystick. I think they're going to need this pick composition to really start to get some picks. Not right now necessarily, but 5-6 minutes from now is where you want to really start making that happen, and Loki is going to have to be a big part of that.
I want like an achievement. If you steal 100 or something like that back camps, that you get a title in game called the Back Camp Bandit. And that would be a very, very fun one to have. Probably a pain to track and get going your way, but still.
But that's not our problem.
Yeah, that's something I could put that on somebody else. Now that it's out in the world, it's not even my pressure. Somebody else can go make a Reddit post or something about it. And as of right now, you wanted more picks. Rotwin gets plucked, a nice knock up. They don't have the follow-up damage. The minions as well right there. Makes it a little awkward for Joystick to get the pressure going. Good strife in mid lane, catches out Hydraxin, but again, they aren't following up as heavily. I think if Cherio has ult there, that's a kill.
Absolutely. Hydraxin completely out of mana, and Cherry is going to try and make a play happen, at least force him off this wave if he can. And the fact that Hydraxin's out of mana shouldn't be a surprise, because he doesn't have a starter item. He went with just the Talon Trinket Rush in the mid lane, so no MP5 whatsoever for him on this soul. I wonder what he's saving that spot for. I don't think that this is, a crazy sort of option for him or anything like that, but maybe, oh, right, it's Benevolence. So these are SCC games, so this was played before the hotfix. So he's going for Benevolence. That makes sense. Okay, now we're all on the same page.
In fact, now you know what? I'm going to harp on it. Why the hell don't all of you have it? Except for look, you've got 2 junglers right now that maybe shouldn't. And I think, of course, you can maybe flex it around for those solo laners, but I notice Sap hasn't picked it up, which is maybe going to make a difference. So I now want to keep my eyes on the gold, which admittedly with First Blood Bounty isn't as far ahead for Just of 6 as I really thought it would. They also have more Benevolences, Benevololi, whatever you want to call them, on the one side. And so they need to maybe pick up the farm game a little bit to pull even further ahead.
The Benevolence takes a little bit, it's spooling that starts to pull you ahead. So it takes time for those the multitude of benevolencies to start to kick in. So I think, right around 12 to 15 minutes, somewhere in that zone would be where I'm expecting the gold lead to either be noticeably larger than you would expect it or noticeably smaller than you'd expect it because of the effect of that. I guess just 2 extra benevolences, but that's a good amount of extra benevolence, I would say, here for just F6.
And being on the Odin, maybe on the Soul not as important. I think just putting it onto specifically Lestimics here seems like it's going to be pretty helpful in terms of getting not just ahead, but in those team fights later on when the ult starts making a big difference. We only have seen them really showcase a little bit. Toddy plucked, now lurking in the waters, looking for some burst. Calvin going to be able to find him with a 3 right afterward. I didn't think he had the damage for it, but Calvin wanted to make sure that I was proved wrong. And now it looks like a fight over the Greater Scorpion. Worst Turtle, about 6/7 HP. There's a weird fraction for you. He's going to have to fall back on this one. Does Joystick come in, get a kill? Fall back.
Very close to surviving there for Toddy. Rotwin's ultimate comes out, and getting that damage mitigation was critical, but ends up still not being enough in that moment against the double ultimate dive from Team Joystick. And that's the pressure that Sobek puts on you. I mean, Toddy messes up his beads, uses the mid-air, the classic boost beads alert, and it ends up being an easy kill after the fact for Team Joystick. And now he doesn't have ult or beads, so you're feeling really bad if you're the Artemis.
I was talking about Boosh the other day, and it's got to be the worst case scenario where you had a fantastic career, but Boosh beads is what you're known for. Right now, Toddy is looking to get known for the fact that he doesn't have those beads. Cherio gets credit for the kill in the trap, starts the back, and is going to be able to find themselves a second over here twice within a minute onto this Artemis.
And immediately, you know where I'm going if I'm Joystick, as soon as he respawns? Right on back. I'm going right on back to the duo lane. Because that's the thing about Sobek is that, if we're talking about characters like Ares and Hunbats and how important your beads are against them, and then you lose your beads, it's like, okay, they're going to have a window. They've got a kill window against you. But it requires their ultimate to come back up. It's a long cooldown. It's not the case with Sobek. You're under threat from Sobek from his 1. That's really the problem when you don't have beads. So it's easy for him to really punish those beads windows because it doesn't require a big investment from him. He really just has to walk over and just be within pluck range or blink pluck range in 20 seconds, which is roughly the entire lane.
As long as he's there, you're in danger. And he's got that blink back in 10 seconds, which is going to make things, as you had said, more devastating with the combo. But the question will be the follow-up. Cherio has that ult. That, again, makes things scary. I think if I'm Toddy, I'm very, very cautious. Maybe more wards start cropping up, and you can see those in the jungle for just F6, making sure that they can catch out and sniff out some of those rotations. Calvin's hanging out in mid lane. Soul is just as susceptible. She has, the damage immunity, but for the most part, you're going to get plucked unless you are either preemptively going into your 3 or, again, preemptively beadsing.
You have to react to it pretty quickly, but I think that you don't want to necessarily fight around this Soul quite yet if you're Team Joystick, because she has so much lifesteal, and you don't have the anti-heal ready for you.
Oh, Worst Turtle gets aggressive onto E-Chrome. E-Chrome not going to get the stun. That
nice block.
Brilliant pluck from Calvin to get the peel for the team. The stun comes out from Sap, and it's just Calvin right now in the middle of everyone, taken to about half HP, but he gets E-Chrome out of there, and that was key. E-Chrome had to use the ult, but managed to keep his beads, and I'm sure you're more than happy with that. Admittedly, you would have liked to kill if you're just F6.
Now in the mid lane, Hydroxid in trouble, does not get into the Sap in time. Sap gets the kill.
And now they're looking for a 2v2. Good route from Rotwin, but they're chasing down a Cage. Drop from Lestimics forces the ult out of Cherio on the side. Now it's Calvin lurking in the waters, applying the slow, trying to keep Rotwin in combat. Good body blocks. Not enough damage. Rotwin walks on out of here. Lestimics shielded up. Doesn't seem to be in much trouble. And Joystick are just going to let that one fall.
It's still really good timing now for Joystick because red buff is up, and all the lead that they have is on the backline. If you look at Sap and E-Chrome with massive leads in each of their roles, 2 levels for each of them, and it's only going to get bigger once Just F6 lose both of their dual lane side buffs. That's going to be a problem because Worst Turtle, now his dives are far less effective. The tanks aren't going to feel tanky against how far ahead Joystick is. And I imagine that Sap is going to be able to back and buy a full item.
Wow.
Because he hasn't backed for quite some time.
Not only that, Sap's 3 levels up in mid as of right now. Look, you're fighting, and Echrome's taking a lot of damage, but Rotwin maybe biting off more than they can chew. I admire Joystick here because there's a lot of times where we've seen teams in that exact scenario turn and continue a fight, and you probably lose Echrome if you continue that fight. With Tusky available, beads up for Artemis, I mean, they're not going to get CC'd enough that you're going to walk out happily. And so admire their capabilities to go ahead and pull back on that one, especially because that ever-important Gold Fury is hanging around in the limit. Echrome, though, is going to get the beats off the ult and gets out of there with 19 HP. And he stays alive. It costs a lot, though.
It costs a lot, beads and ult, but
you don't, a death.
You don't give a shutdown over, and that's really important. You don't let Toddy get the ball rolling in that lane, and that is key for Joystick, is to keep these backliners up and living now. You gotta say, I was so sure that Sap was gonna back and buy a Divine Ruin. I cannot believe he goes Soul Gem against Terra, Soul with Lifesteal, and Camazotz. They need anti-heal so badly. That's like the only way they can not win a fight.
Well, Rotwin is caught out the ult, going to get some of those damage mitigations you had highlighted earlier. Rotwin looks like he's going to be out of there, throws up the walls for a stun just in case. Is able to get out alive. Joystick, once again, getting a ton of damage onto a target, but not able to close the gap. Not only missing the Divine Ruin, though, continuing the anti-heal conversation. No brawlers there for the Loki either. So you're just kind of lacking all around.
Surely Cheerio is going to get it, right? Like, no way.
Like this item.
Yeah, if he goes Jotuns here, I'm losing it. I'm absolutely losing it because it's just you need it against what Just F6 have. They're in such a good position for Team Joystick. You likely can win every fight from here if you just buy anti-heal.
Not maybe the best position. I can't tell if it's Echrome or Rotwin right now who are end up biting off more than they can shoot. Seems like it's going to be Rotwin. Cheerio rotates on in, and what a great follow-up from Sap to be able to find the kills. 2 found immediately. Toddy forced under. The only thing that is saving this Artemis's life is Tusky, making sure to stun out everybody that's going for the chase. But this feels like a Gold Fury, not necessarily for free, but should be a little easier.
Got to be worried about Lestemics only, but he's not even going to toss his hat in the ring with how healthy the entirety of Team Joystick
and 5
is.
of them.
And all 5 of them, right. So, I was so worried about the team fight prowess of Just F6, and I still think that if they can keep this game within reach, they're going to be hard to beat when it comes to 5-on-5s and all your non-supports are level 20. Like their team fight is crazy good, but they got to get there, and that's been the problem so far. Joystick has done a very good job of being aggressive, using these side lane leads, setting this Artemis behind, setting this Soul behind, and then not just letting their foot off the gas, but being in the enemy jungle on time for each of these buff invades.
And I got to give credit where credit's due. Just F6, read the scenario we had highlighted as Lestemics being the potential threat to a Gold Fury. They go for the Pyromancer instead.
Yeah.
And try to keep things as even as possible. They have fallen a little bit more behind in gold than I'm sure they would have wished. 2,000 hovering just around that mark. And it's going to continue that way. 3-0, 3 levels up, still in mid, 2 levels up there for Echrome. Sap and Echrome have just been having a really good game, and it's not, I mean, part of it is exactly what they're doing. They're playing well, but I think a lot of it is also just the fact that Calvin, you had highlighted all these picks, the way they've been oriented. Sap has hit some great strifes. The CC from Team Joystick just seems to be hitting every mark they needed to.
They've been really on point with how they wanted to play this pick style comp. It's finding 2v2 skirmishes and 3v3 skirmishes and not trying to 5v5 because we don't like our odds in those scenarios. It's more about finding the right fights for us.
Well, right fight might not be here for Sap. Caught in the cage, finds the apple, and it seems to be enough to dissuade this fight. Calvin's going to be able to rotate in. 4 members of Team Joystick are in the mid lane, and now Mogau's looking for the setup. A great knock-up on hi-rez. Not enough follow-up damage yet. Calvin's lurking in the waters, not going to be able to find the kill on that one. A good knock-up, and Mogau just does not care about the tower. Goes in, gets the kill. It's a one and done. They back up, but they're looking to push down this tower.
I mean, so much damage coming from this Cthulhu already. And he's only level 15 and 3 items deep. It's only going to get better.
And they're going to dive even further. Good stun from Rotwin onto Cherio. Stops the aggression from the Loki. Cherio still has that ult. Toddy, nowhere to be seen, still hanging on the left-hand side of the map. And his team moving forward. Not something I would have anticipated here. Maybe looking for a pick. They've got Mogao semi-isolated. But it seems like it's just going to be moving up into their opposition as they retreat. Nothing big coming out of it. Toddy backs as well. So ultimately just F6, unfortunately, just pushed under towers.
Just not quite enough in the level and items department to leverage their composition. But you started to see it there. I mean, even though Mogao does a lot of damage to hi-rez, took him a long time to kill him anyways, right? It was a ton of lifesteal coming out of this Soul, and the healing there from the Terra, and she's working on a Lotus Crown. You've got plenty of sustain through these team fights and the capability to keep the fight going a little bit longer. If they can find a way to outlast that Cthulhu ult, they're going to be fine.
Well, they're going to have to figure out how to lock down Cherio. Maybe more than this. The ult from the Odin, the cage, seems to be great. A great strife in return. Worst Turtle is the one who's looking to run away, and Sap gets the kill thanks to the detonation. Cherio still alive somehow. Listimics finds the kill, but at what cost? You are isolated. Your shield can only give you so much health. A good jump over the wall back towards the speed buff, but Mogao is waiting. Sap gets themselves a double kill. They lose Cherry, but they find 2.
Really, really sick strife again from Sapman. He is absolutely popping on this Discordia, and that's not Zap Man.
Yeah, it's Sap, comma.
Sap Man. Like, he is owning it right now, playing really well.
A good name to change if he ever needs one. Sapman would be great. Echrome once again in a little bit of trouble, but it doesn't seem like he's too worried about it. Like you said, good Aegis. Now you've got Calvin hanging around. In fact, Toddy is getting low. That's going to be a great banner. Echrome finds the kill on that one. Rotwin gets aggressive. The tower can do a little bit of work. Echrome is still alive, still kicking. If there had been a pluck from Calvin, could have actually spelled Echrome's death. Might have been something to kill hi-rez as well. But ultimately, they'll get the 1, and they'll be happy with it.
I mean, 3 against 1 for a while, and then a 3 against 2, and it's the lesser numbers that end up coming out on top. But it's really the lead there from Echrome, and I say it a lot. There's nothing worse, dying in lane. It happens to everyone, it happens. It's fine. You'll fall a bit behind, but it won't be the end of the world. When you die and then come back to lane and instantly die again, your game is over. Like, it is so hard to come back into the game from that position.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened to Toddy. He died, came back to lane, died instantly again. And then the lead is just so big that Joystick hasn't had to go back over there with extra attention because the lane is just over in Echrome's favor as long as he doesn't die.
3 levels down for the Artemis as of right now. Kills read 9-2 coming on the 18-minute mark. It is a 5,000 gold lead for Team Joystick, and they're looking to push it even further. 5 levels separate the mid laners here. 5-0-1 for Sap at level 19, 0-3-1 for hi-rez at level 14. And you can tell how that damage is affecting Joystick. I mean, it has made a lot of these last fights even easier.
Look, if Sap knew that he was going to be 5 levels up, I guess he's right, and that he doesn't need anti-heal, that he can just outright kill them with his damage. This is not to say that, dear viewer who is watching right now, that you should not build anti-heal in situations like this, because it is worse than just building it. But in this case, when you're this far ahead, it will not matter for Sap. I mean, he is 4 items deep, full item over hi-rez, and he's going to one-shot him from this position. I don't think there's any doubt.
And he has been pretty consistently, just not necessarily one-shotting everybody, but really putting them in their place. As fast track to be the first one to hit level 20, it's right now a race between Sap and Mogao as to who's going to hit that mark first. Mogao, look, has rotated into this. We saw the Cthulhu have a really big impact in mid under that tier 1 tower, but has not made quite as many rotations as we've seen out of the Odin, which might just be the Odin play standing out a little bit more in my mind. It might just be the way things are going. Unfortunately for Toddy, the way things are going is not well. Beats the pluck, uses Tusky, still ends up falling down between the tier 1 and tier 2 tower. No space given by Team Joystick to let this Artemis just exist for a little bit, let alone try to farm and catch up.
Listen, Gore, this is why the EU SCC didn't pick the Artemis last week, because This has happened.
This will happen,
I suppose, and it will happen to Artemis, even if she's the best hunter in the game, which I think she is right now. Even with that in mind, she still has a lot of those same weaknesses. It's still incredibly easy to dive her when she falls behind, and she has been behind since level 5, and that is never a good position to be in. And I really like the way Calvin and Echrome have continued to keep that pressure on, not letting the Artemis start to farm and get to that potent late game. I still think Joystick, they're up 10K in 20 minutes, so they're nearly 10K in 20 minutes. So this game is theirs to lose, no doubt. But it is easier to lose this game from this position than you'd think with what Just F6 have in their team composition. I
mean, so far we haven't seen any Fire Giants. Nobody's even fainted towards it. I say that now as, of course, we watch Joystick walk a little closer to the pit. I think they're just dewarding, and so not putting it in any threat. But there's so much gold. Gold caches, I believe, is what Mifflin had referred to it as, but just in the map, in those towers, to try and bounce back for Just F6. It's going to make a big difference right here, right now. Not a soul to be seen from the Order side around this Fire Giant. Joystick burning it down, not even that quickly. Plenty of opportunities to potentially steal it away, but they're going to go for the map play instead. Take a Tier 1 tower and left. And I guess they're going to pray that it's enough.
I actually like that idea from Just F6. You don't want to contest from this position. You can't give Phoenixes for free. You've got to be here for this. But some pretty key items got finished because they didn't contest and split push that Tier 1 on left. An Odysseus bow for Toddy and a Charon's coin for hi-rez. Those are important coming into this team fight. So I liked that call. Give it up. Got to make a defense on these Phoenixes. I agree with this decision. Don't try and go for towers. Those are foregone conclusions. The difference between fighting down 9K to 11K or 12K at this point in the game, really, really marginal. The gold for Joystick isn't going to be the ender anymore. It's the levels and how many items they had already. So I think that this was the right decision from Just F6.
Now it comes down entirely to how their Phoenix defense is going to be. I mean, they don't have any towers left to defend, so they don't have much of a choice on that. And yet, still, they're simultaneously a little aggressive. It's always nice to see this when a team is confident enough to leave their base just long enough to try and knock down another tower. You had mentioned the little bit of gold they got from the Tier 1 on the left. That opened up an opportunity to finish some items. One more Tier 1 maybe isn't going to give you another Tier 3, but it is still going to be some change in your pocket that you didn't otherwise have. And you're trying to play catch-up, they've hit the cap. They are level 20 on the other side. That 5-level difference is now 2 for a lot of these players. And they're not too worried about it, but aggro, I mean, with Artemis, like you've highlighted it, Just F6 have a great team fight, especially for a defense.
Especially with an upgraded Frenzy now for Rotwin, a Blink ultimate coming from him. This Terra's going to have to find a pretty good one.
They're set up. Calvin gets aggressive, but not aggressive enough. They're not really looking for the fight just yet, and the same thing for Just F6. They have no reason to go fishing for a fight outside of this Phoenix. But you can see over in the mid lane, it's Cherio versus Worst Turtle. This is the perfect angle for it because it depends on who decides to get aggressive first. It looks like Cherio will be the one to jump under the Phoenix. He's not going to be able to find the kill, and this is exactly how Just F6 want this to wait.
Nice and patient.
Oh, wow!
Except from Worst Turtle. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, he gets too aggressive. Rotwin goes in, but it's not enough. Now you've been isolated, killed off. hi-rez erased from the map. Toddy is the last, well, I would say, line of defense here. It's not going to be too much. Lystemix standing alone under the Titan, and there's not much you can do. 2 Phoenixes about to fall. Cherio committed to getting rid of that one. The Titan taking its damage. Joystick, they burn themselves a lead early on, and they just keep that streak going throughout the game.
Yeah, that one was a no-doubter from them, basically from the early stages, even with, I believe, First Blood going over to Just F6. As soon as Toddy fell behind, died in lane, then comes back to lane, dies again, that dual lane was always going to be problematic. And then the fact that you see the mid laner and Sap get really far ahead.
Yeah.
Certainly missing Sotos here today, I think.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there in game number 1. We're going to do that in just a little bit, and then we'll jump right into game number 2 to see if Just F6 can turn this around. So we'll be right back. Team Joystick take game number 1 in what is admittedly a pretty convincing fashion. They are in control of that game. They lose first blood, and then pretty much every other fight after that goes their way. They manage to control the neutral objectives, get immense amounts of farm to the point where it's almost ludicrous how far they are ahead as early as they are in aggro. It just feels good for them. I mean, it's still technically a losable game, but they don't lose it.
They don't lose it. They didn't lose a single fight after that. No, I mean, that's with, by the way, Sap not having benevolence, and Hydroxin on the other side did have benevolence, and the guy with benevolence was still down 5 levels in that game, which goes to illustrate just how far ahead the mid laner was there from Joystick, and just in general how far the entire team was ahead. This is the sequence that ends the game, though, in my opinion, that Toddy dies at level 6, comes back to lane, still level 6, dies again. And then at that point, Echrome has a couple level lead. The fact that Echrome got away at 20 HP in that one engagement actually ended up being pretty critical, because that could have been a way back in the game for just F6.
And I just think, well, first off, how many strifes we saw hit and connect from Sap was ludicrous to me. But as well as the damage output, after a while, I mean, even here is slightly up on where the solo laner for just F6 was. Which to me means that there's a big pivot that needs to be made for just F6. But I will give them credit. This is what happened last time we watched them as well, which was game 1. Unfortunately, just was a huge loss for them. They had a lot more fight back this time around than they did in game 1 of the last set we saw. But with Lestimix being the only player on the team that gets kills, Toddy's 0-5, never really got a chance to survive in lane. You've got four members. Terry was the only one that died. That one didn't register with me until just now. It makes things a little more game to game, right? Game 2, they bounced back last time around. I imagine they're going to be able to change up their strategy this time too.
Have to. I mean, I think Worst Turtle, even though he's on a god that we know he's pretty comfortable on, did not look particularly comfortable in this game. Less than 4,000 damage on the Camazotz. Going to need a little bit more than that, of course. Put some actual pressure on this backline, who didn't have really any. By the time it was a 5-on-5, the game was, for all intents and purposes, over. But still, get some more ganks coming to duo, get some ganks going in mid. Try and not let them set their feet and get so far ahead.
Well, they opt to be your first pick once again. Let's see if in game number 2 they can change what they need to in order to take down Team Joystick, push us to a game number 3, or if Team Joystick is going to be joining Elysium up at the top of the standings with a 2-0 already. They, actually aren't adapting too much. They're going to go right back to the Merlin ban. And admittedly, it's kind of weird because it's like, man, you just played a really good Discordia game, but like, I don't want to first ban Discordia. Like, that just seems outrageous to try.
I don't really want to first ban Merlin either, but here we are.
They're doing it.
Here we have arrived. Right, twice in a row. That's what's going on. Sap must be the Merlin master right now over in Europe because Just F6 going with the exact same look so far, that Heimdall. And look, I get it. You just got destroyed by this backline. You know, Sap and Echrome were really, really strong in that game, but Calvin was important on that Sobek. That's something that you might want to look to take away. You know, there are things that weren't just related to the backline that happened in that game, but Just F6 seemed pretty locked in on going with those sorts of changes.
Well, so far, second verse, same as the first. Exact same 6 bans at the very top. And Artemis is the first pick. It's you get the Tiamat, the Morgan, the Fae banned away, as well as that Yemoja, very, very meta bans on the side of Joystick. That Osiris, the Heimdall, and as you had highlighted, the Merlin, who must just be insane for Sap. I'd argue as well for Echrome, and I will give Echrome a lot of credit. This Heimdall that we've seen from Echrome gets banned out a lot against them, and has for, I believe, the last year, because Echrome is kind of just nuts at Heimdall, as it turns out. Joystick are going to change the script a little bit, though. They get the Sobek, that's the same, but instead of going for the Hachiman this early on, which you had said, look, they already have their Hunter, you're not necessarily hurting for it, they do grab up the Cthulhu, and again skip over the Odin.
Surprised again, but, you know, Lestemix was the only one who got some kills last game for Just F6, and doesn't surprise me that they want to go back to it. Still think that knowing Mogao and what he played in the past, maybe his God Pool's changed. Maybe he doesn't like, the Odin rework that happened and isn't a big fan of it anymore. So they go with the Cthulhu, and now they just lock in Cthulhu Morrigan. And the team fight, which looked so good for Just F6 on paper last game, we kept thinking, okay, if they can get to that point, maybe they can make it happen. Now, good luck out team fighting double Cthulhu Ultimate, because you probably won't.
Yeah, you don't do that often. I mean, I guess they are still in position to pivot to like a Nemesis, which is great for one Cthulhu, not too great for 2 Cthulhus. Sunder is nice, but still, 2 Cthulhus. That's the counterpoint. That's really all there is to it.
Yeah.
They do get a Fafnir, though, locked in alongside it. And Fafnir has been a little more kind to these teams lately. Depends on which team you're watching. The Bolts, not as successful as some of the others, whereas, you know, your PBMs, a lot of these other teams that are at the very top in the SBL, love running it back. And just like that, they're also going to be running back specifically Hachiman. They lock him in, band away were Jingwei and Chernabog, keeping things a little more limited, but at the same time, they're going right back to picks that are suiting them.
I mean, I'm just surprised that, you know, when you get gunned down by Sobek Hachiman as Artemis that game, then you decide Jingwei is the better ban for you in that spot. I don't know. I'm very surprised by the Jingwei ban. I feel like I'd be begging for a Hachiman ban if I'm Toddy, because that is a matchup where Caledonian Boar doesn't do nearly as much work as it does in most matchups, because Hachiman's initiation in is a long-duration CC immunity that he gets to just hold W and come at me, and Boar doesn't really protect me in those instances, whereas it could from a character like Jingwei that might have to airstrike in, but then as soon as she lands, will get stunned. I don't know. I'm surprised that they're allowed to get Hachiman again.
And Cherio's going back to this Loki. If you saw the numbers on there, there's only one that they care about, and that's the 100% win rate on the Loki. Ignore the fact that it's a 10% pick rate and only one game played, and we literally just watched it. But the 100% win rate is really where you lean heavy on here if you're Cherio. Worked out well in game number 1. Admittedly, I don't see any reason it should be worse off this time around. He was the only one who died. If he's still the only one who dies, that's perfectly fine for them.
Yeah.
I don't know that you're actually happier to have the Odin cage. It feels kind of like a locked in here with them as opposed to them locked in here with you.
Yeah, that's kind of how it was in game 1. I don't know. I think that you're looking at Hydraxen's got to have a little bit of a better game on the Discordia. Of course, we understand he's in a sub position. It's very difficult to come in and do that, especially against a team that is as strong as Joystick. But certainly can't afford to fall as far behind as he did in the last game if they want to keep it close.
As you can imagine, you've heard us talking the whole time, but it's still me and Aggro that are hanging out here. And Doug, once again, giving us glorious views. Great angles as well. There were like a couple of team fights in the last game that really, really gave the view that we needed to see. And, of course, we saw, I think, the game-ending play, which was Worst Turtle getting a little too aggressive and maybe pushing a little too far forward. And now it's all back to the start, Aggro. I mean, Just F6, Joystick. We saw a not even early first blood, but a good first blood from Just F6 that ultimately didn't end up turning into too much more. They didn't find many more kills. And it was at the very, level 4, level 3? No, level 2 mark. Loki was hardly anything in that game at the beginning, and it still wasn't enough to stop Cherio from just existing the way that he wanted to.
No, he was still able to find a way to make an impact, and that's really all you have to do. In games like that, where even when you fall behind, you just have to find a way to be an impactful member of the team. And Cherio's veteran experience, I'm sure, helping in that department. Interesting that Worst Turtle goes not for a jungle starter. Remember, this is on the old before the hotfix, and he goes for a fighter's mask.
Oh, and he once again is incredibly low here in the mid lane. Looks to turn some damage around. With that Morrigan mark, you always have to be a little worried about how much they're going to be able to throw back at you. But ultimately, neither team is going to see anyone fall today. And that actually is the other question. We talked about double Cthulhu, which is great. Double Loki can be really, really irritating. Although if Mogao gets his way in lane, it definitely seems like you could lean one way or the other. Morrigan just brings up so many opportunities. And is luckily going to escape a pin right there as well.
Good use of the beads. Needed him. I like the regank there from Worst Turtle. Don't be scared. Even though he doesn't have that starter item, instead of going mannequins, he goes fighter's mask. This means he's going to go benevolence. As again, this is before the hotfix. So he's going to try and stay more even. But already he's been more active on the map when it comes to affecting the lanes than he was in the last game, and that's got to have to continue here for Just F6.
Toddy is the one who I have to keep my eyes on. Toddy spent a lot of time dead that I'm assuming are wishing they hadn't. And you can see I had highlighted it, I think, in game 1, but those trap placements are going to be crucial to trying to block Calvin from getting anything done, as well as trying to strip away. That's a nice steal for the Scorpion. We don't get to talk about that too often when they do get invaded like that. Stripped away, that's some healing now for Calvin and Echrome. A little bit of experience taken from Just F6, and admittedly, depending on how fast the game is going, it adds up.
It does. It does end up adding up. Oh, did Mogao really get that blue?
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, I got to do a slightly better job of securing that.
Oh, wow.
Hydraxen, one more auto does it for Sap. And a really nice solo kill there for Joystick in the mid lane. First blood on your mid laner on a Morrigan who can be nice and aggressive. Definitely a good start now for Team Joystick.
Now, Echrome fighting over a purple buff. It is not their purple buff that they are fighting over. Joystick invades and strips away what Just F6 have, with first blood taken there by Sap, and the kills going the way they have, or kill going the way they have. It starts to lean more towards Joystick again, but again, this is also a great place to find control and pivot things back in your favor. Just F6, at this point, have lost or were about to lose an Artemis. And I think Toddy is playing a lot more cautiously with that knowledge. Making a loop to catch off Calvin. Good hammer stun from Rotwin. The damage is there. You have suppressed the Insolent to get some damage, but not enough to follow through. Calvin uses the last of the mana for the dash and gets out alive.
Man, Toddy must have just placed a trap in order to not have that cooldown up for that hammer, because if it's just a trap underneath that hammer, into the Sunder, that's probably a kill there for Just F6, and especially if Toddy can get it and get off the ground running, that would have been a great turnaround from where he was in the last game. But it's a little unfortunate for the timing there of that trap cooldown, which is fairly long. I think that's one of the changes. It got buffed to be a little bit shorter cooldown, but still fairly long.
Yeah, it's not going to be up anywhere near as often as you'd want. You still get 3 of them, though, which feels pretty good whenever you're able to lock someone down and, again, keep some of that control away, as Calvin, I believe, strips away that Scorpion as well. Gets the last hit that is necessary. Also, small plays. I think Mifflin and I were talking about it yesterday during the SBL. But when you have a Fafnir on one side and you just desperately don't want him to steal anything away, you got to put your body between him and the buff. We'll hold that thought as Cherio gets caught in the cage. Ult to get out of there, but still dunked on by Lestimics. Takes a lot of damage in the turnaround. Doesn't have the ult for the re-engage, but he does have Mogao. Unfortunately, Worst Turtle sees the low health bar and recognizes he can go in and abuse Cherio a little bit. Forces him to fall back and becomes a back camp bandit of his own. Echrome under a little bit of pressure in the duo lane as Calvin continues looking for some more. Fighting on all sides of the map, but still no one falls.
Hey, you get Cherio's ultimate, you send him back to base. Worst Turtle in a good position until this, where Sap should be able to pick this up. Yeah, nice little use of the transformation. And now Lestemics is going to have to be careful about how much damage he takes, but he's a tanky Odin. He doesn't have to be too concerned, even with a Loki ultimate coming through. Nice rotation in from Sap, who's already up 2 levels.
2 levels, 2-0, all kills for Team Joystick. 100% kill participation, and he is literally the only one. Not a single assist over there. Sap is doing it on his own. Cherio trying to do it on his own. Gets the transformation out of Rotwin at the red buff. Cherio's ult isn't available just yet, but that is a huge ult expended on the side of Rotwin, just to secure a red buff, but they get it, and they slow down Joystick from stealing things away.
It's a big cooldown for sure, but I think it's a worthy cause in order to make sure that Hydraxin just keeps getting farm. I mean, if he loses that red buff, that's another buff that he wouldn't get the golden experience from, and that lead would just continue to grow for Sap. So even though it definitely feels costly, if you're Rotwin, you know, your playmaking potential is now certainly lower than it would be if you had your ultimate. At least you got your mid laner some farm and protected him in the process. So a good trade from Just F6.
And Sap still controlling things. I saw Calvin taking on the onus of a support when you are up against an Artemis, which is the unfortunate nature of, hey, is anybody over here? No? I'm going to step in this trap.
Yep.
Get these vines down.
Don't mind if I do.
See what I can do. And ultimately just make sure that I can have a little more leeway, or in this case for Calvin to have a little more leeway. If you look at these trap placements that are currently in the lane, makes it a little easier to get a pluck onto Toddy. Hasn't happened yet, though, and that is great news for Toddy. Since last game, that was such a big pressure point for Team Joystick. What was it? It was 2 in a row. I mean, immediately it was one good pluck from Calvin into Cherio rotating over. And they just made sure that Artemis wasn't able to sit down and be patient for even a second. So there's 2 levels in mid. They're pretty much still even for Hunters. And that is, I would argue, a big win for Just F6 compared to last game.
Oh, Echrome stunned. Wow. Has to use the beads right away, quick, because if Toddy, again, can step up, drop that trap, it's going to increase his damage by a good amount and easily killed off the enemy ADC. So now no beads means that Echrome probably not under that much threat up against the Artemis because of his own ultimate, but it certainly takes away the aggression out of that lane, which is key in this matchup.
Red buff respawning for Just F6. This has been a pressure point that Joystick has been applying pretty much all game. And it doesn't look like they're going to be able to get down there. They were lurking in the jungle, but they weren't able to stay long enough, or I guess feel confident long enough to be able to pick that up. They do get the left side mid camps. I feel like mid camps, I was watching some old Season 2 gameplay. It used to be such a huge deal.
Yes.
And nowadays, like you get to see that there. It's good experience, but maybe not as big a difference maker as it once was. But it's 2 days in a row, Aggro. I find myself talking about mid camps, which is maybe my fault for watching old games.
No, dude, Season 2 mid camps, I still have nightmares. If you lost your of the first respawns, if you lost 3 out of 4 mid camps, you were down like a level and a half. Like it was crazy how valuable they were then. And so it was all about getting mid prio. That's why ESET was so good. in Season 2 meta, at least in the meta that we were playing on Xbox. Like, it was so critical because you just got free mid-pressure, purple pot Raijin, that kind of stuff, because it just got you mid-pressure, and that's literally all that mattered. You won and lost the game based on how many mid-camps you got, and that was all it was. And I'm very glad that we are no longer in that space. You know, Sap is getting more mids, I'm sure, than Hydraxin, but not game-ending.
Well, we'll see if he can get even more than that. Worst Turtle gets aggressive, but it's going to be the transformation from Sap into the Loki one more time. Ult is going to be able to secure that, but loses his life in the process. 3-1 Toddy picking up a big kill to shut down that level 12 mid laner for Joystick.
Something going in the favor of Just F6. Nice little shutdown that's perfect that goes on to Toddy. Best case scenario there for Just F6. Plus, it's Sap using the beads at the same time. So really, really good kill. Trading 1-for-1 at that point, absolutely worth Worst Turtle's life. Worst Turtle's level 9, Sap level 12.
Ooh, getting aggressive for E-Chrome. Ults in on the Toddy, drops the banner, and that's about all she wrote because the tower is still standing there. But Calvin blinks over the wall, goes for the pluck. The beads come out. Toddy is going to be able to save themselves there. But it is a narrow miss from Joystick. They continue getting aggressive as well. Toddy is just barely alive. Speaking of barely alive, well, he's got more than enough health, but Cherio's wildly deep and walks right into a luscious waiting speed buff. I'm so surprised that he has the control to not try and steal that away.
Yeah, that's that. You want to talk about being a veteran? That's it right there. Seeing a speed buff, knowing that you could take it, but that you would die for it. And he ends up making the right decision there from Cherio. Decides not to go for speed. Maybe could have lived if he had to ult out, but definitely better to keep that ultimate up and ready to go in case of a fight, especially if Just F6 want to get aggressive around the Pyromancer.
Some insanely deep ward coverage from Joystick on the left-hand side. There's not even a Gold Fury available over there. Mogao locked in a cage with 3 people, but it's going to be Cherio who jumps in. There's now 4 members of Just F6 over here. Cherio almost able to get the kill on the Worst Turtle. Mogao secures that one. Cherio loses his life. Mogao has no health, no mana, and is stunned out right now by Lestimics. Looks to get away. The last bit of that mana bar used as a dash. Calvin goes for a pluck onto Hydraxin. He's waiting for this rotation. Mogao gets killed off by Lestimics. He's picked up 2, but Sap has joined the fight, and Sap is going to help Calvin kill off the opposing mid laner. 2 for 2, jungle for jungle, but mid for solo.
Not bad, I'd say, there for Just F6. Look, even though that isn't the greatest trade in the world, they're being so much more aggressive than they were last game. I mean, 11 and a half minutes in, it's less than 1,000 gold lead for Just F6, despite the massive lead in mid lane. Toddy is much closer this game, is not super far behind. The experience is not in a good point for Just F6, but I think a lot of that is in the mid lane. So if you can just keep Sap out of these fights in some way, either by killing him or taking fights that he can't get to, this game's pretty even for Just F6, and that's really all you can ask after game 1.
Yeah, I mean, not only being able to keep it even, but being able to showcase that they can be aggressive themselves. They're finding more kills. I mean, they've already put 1 more on the board than they did entirely in game number 1. Granted, it's still 2 there for Lestimics, but it's something better. And you have to remember, I'm going to say it for, I believe, the 3rd time, but Hydraxin is subbing in, not someone that they're as used to playing with. And so having a sub be 3 levels down is, unfortunately not uncommon when you're playing especially a team like Team Joystick, who is going to control a majority of the map. Still, I keep my eyes on neutral objectives at this point, though. We're 12 minutes, approaching 13 minutes fast into the game. Greater Scorpion on the left-hand side here in the Gold Fury pit, finally taken down. And that means that we will have a Gold Fury spawning 13 minutes into the game, with Pyromancer and Fire Giant available over on the right-hand side. It makes things get a little spicier. That's where Joystick really started to hammer home a lead, was when they took that Gold Fury.
And this time they have to be a little bit more concerned about the defense potential from Just F6 at this point in the game at the very least, because Erlang Shen, stronger than Camazotz in these sort of jungle skirmishes. I like the Discordia in the jungle versus the Soul. You've got a Fafnir now to buff up the whole team. I think Just F6 have made some good adjustments, even though their 5-on-5 might not be as difficult to play against. They still have a lot of tools in the 5v5, and they're more early game slanted tools, which is important, and that's been pretty critical in keeping them more involved in this game and keeping them from falling quite as far behind.
Something we don't get to talk about often, Draugr, secured by Toddy. And so that's going to be able to bounce back some aggression. Unfortunately, Toddy gets plucked right there. Has the leap, so it's not going to be the end of the world. But you can see the pressure from Joystick all centered on the left side of the map as of right now. Mogao even starting to make a rotation over towards mid. It's starting to scream that they want a fight for a Gold Fury. It's going to be this pluck potential setup. Lastimics waiting around the corner. Same thing for Rotwin, but they don't know what's waiting for him. Sap comes around, nice. A double stun to be picked up, but it's a cage that captures two. Mogao gets aggressive, but he turns, is trying to figure out where to go. Drops the Frenzy for the team and immediately goes into the ult. Zoning out Worst Turtle, zoning out 4 members as of right now of just F6. Lastimics left alone, and Lastimics goes down. Cherio takes a lot of damage. Worst Turtle going for the chase. Worst Turtle finds the kill, but it's still 3 members on the back foot for just F6.
Soul Laners did a good job that fight. Lastimics, even though he dies, he did a good job in that engagement. He finds a good cage. He keeps them very busy. And that's what buys Just F6 time to actually get the kill onto Cherio.
Worst Turtle gets stunned out. Good transformation from Sap, but better turnaround. Hydraxin styling him on him the way Discordia can. Good stripes and good lockdown once again onto Mogao. Hydraxin has virtually no HP, but still a little bit of damage is being thrown out there. Worst Turtle's rotating back in. They're trying to lock down Calvin. Calvin dashes over to the tower, gets out alive alongside Mogao, but they do pick up Sap, which is a big kill.
And all of a sudden, look at the mid lane experience gap. Level 15 only to level 16 on the other side. Things are looking up now for Just F6. They have a gold lead for the first time since like minute 2 of game 1. They team fought really well there. And again, I want to give credit to Lastimics and just good zone coverage for what Just F6 was going to be doing. And Worst Turtle's having a much better game on this Erlong Shen. Already nearly doing more than half his damage than he had in all of the last game. Cherio's struggling a little bit more again. And Sap, I think it's time for him to start finding a new transformation. I think this Loki just a little bit too squishy at this point. I'd be looking at Odin with where Lastimics is in his build, especially once he finishes off Pridwin. And that's a big thing that I look for whenever I'm playing the Morrigan is what item power spikes are people hitting and how can I use them. And I think Pridwin is one that I would be very interested in having for myself. I would like to take one of those too. And of course the Cthulhu transformation, we haven't seen that one quite yet.
Yeah, that's the one that we were talking about a lot in picks and bans, but having an Odin on your team, you had mentioned Mogao being a good Odin player. And Sap would have to be the one to step up to the mark, but still having an Odin on your team, a cage that you can just drop, always feels pretty nice. You highlighted the Pridwin being finished for Odin as well. So maybe something we'll keep our eyes on. That blue crystal not yet full for Sap. A good pluck, but it's a defensive pluck from Joystick. As Just F6, not just aggressive, but dictating the pace of this. They are the ones looking for the Fury first. They haven't started it, but they're forcing Joystick specifically to play defensively around it.
Calvin does have Phantom now. He didn't have it going into that last fight because he hadn't backed after hitting level 12. So something to note is that Lastimics might not be able to get as much value out of the cage as he did last time. It wasn't value in terms of keeping people in your mage damage or killing them in the cage because they can't run away. It was more keeping them at bay from the rest of the team while the rest of their team took care of Cherio.
Well, Cherio maybe looking to take care of Rotwin. Not going to be able to find him isolated enough. Doesn't commit the ult to it either. They're going to fall back. Still hovering around. Oracle Harpies at this point actually maybe more important than not. The ward coverage and the vision on that Fury has been the conversation for what feels like a few minutes since they took that greater Scorpion on this side. It's been a lot of pressure, I think, from both teams to try and figure it out. And you can see deep blue wards from Just F6 to try and catch it out. It's Cherio, though, who gets aggressive. Hydraxin, 2/3 HP. Sap thinking about going in, but not going in. A good pluck from Calvin is going to help lock down Lastimics. A good leap from Lastimics undoes the pluck, and now Calvin might be the one who's caught out. A great cage the Phantom used, but the trap is there. Calvin takes too much damage. Worst Turtle eats him alive, and now Cherio is the one who is in a little bit of trouble. Low health, forced to ult away, and it is Sap. It is Mogao trying to turn it around, but Sap, you don't have the health bar for this. Transforms into the Odin, but transforms in an awkward position, just barely out of there, but stays alive. E-Chrome's rotated in, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be enough.
No, he's just totally dead to rights. A 2 for 0 for Just F6. And Worst Turtle still has that blink looking for Sap. but won't be able to catch up. A great fight from Just F6, and Joystick struggling when not so far ahead that they can just afford to make these mistakes. Mogao just not very far ahead on this Cthulhu at all. He's behind in his build and very squishy. hi-rez doing a ton of damage in these fights and finding good strife after good strife. That fight was good for Just F6, and they didn't hit Golden Apple in the middle of a cramped team fight. So imagine how much work that ultimate could have done if they would have been able to land it. It's not looking good all of a sudden for Team Joystick. They've got to slow the pace of this game down now, which seems a little bit different than what they were doing at the early stage of this game and what they were doing in Game 1, of course. But I think that I would be telling my team, look, Cherry needs some farm, Mogao needs some farm. The front line isn't able to do nearly as much as they were in the last game, and they're starting to feel the consequences of that. So let's get them some much-needed golden experience and revisit these team fights whenever we feel like our front line can actually withstand them.
Just under 3,000, kind of hovering around that 2,500 gold mark in favor of Just F6. They get themselves the Fury. They lose out on the Pyromancer. And Joystick are able to turn back at least a neutral objective. But like you said, a lot of work to be done as the fights go on. They're fighting a much more even game on every single regard. In fact, Mogao is actually 2 levels down. Same thing, Cherio 1 level down. And so for some of them, they're not even fighting an even game. They're fighting a much further behind and difficult game for them to try and play into. Maybe not affecting Mogao as heavily as a 2-level, well, 1.5 level, let's call it, deficit would necessarily dictate for maybe a Warrior, since he's playing on the Cthulhu here. But a lot of pressure, I think, falling onto all of Joystick to start cleaning up these fights, because it has worked wonderfully for Just F6. And it's all about that prioritization and or if they're able to even get to the carries. Last time around, you had mentioned how the deficit was on the carries in Game 1. They're not worried so far. I haven't seen a lot of pressure falling on Toddy or hi-rez.
No, I mean, both of them have 3 out of 4 relics total, only the Aegis down for Toddy, and you see the potency of this Artemis whenever she doesn't fall super far behind. That these chain stuns throughout an entire team fight are difficult to play around because it's homing damage. You have to beads it or use some CC immunity if you've got anyone else near you. You're still going to take a chunk of 400 or so damage from the board connecting, and you can't miss it. So when you're not behind, that feels like a big difference maker. And Toddy now nearly full build, could sell his benevolence now whenever he's ready for the next item, because he's got full 5 items besides that starter.
Feels pretty good if you're Toddy this time around. 1-0-3, as you had highlighted, being able to finish off a lot of this build. I mean, the last game was camped. Well, not even camped intentionally. The first 2 deaths, yes. After that, it was just easy pickings. Now, it's whether or not you can even get to the Artemis that has become a huge issue for Joystick. And it has been, again, you called for the Odin transformation. Sap went for it.
Yeah.
And yet it didn't translate to as much success as I'm assuming Sap wanted, and maybe as well as much success as you wanted. So maybe Cthulhu becoming the better option just to have so much teamfight disrupt. Sap now has to be worried about a lot. Ends up going for the transformation. Cherio with a huge rotation. hi-rez is low, but hi-rez isn't dead. hi-rez turns it around. Calvin finally able to pick up the kill, but it's jungle for mid as of right now. Sap has used that ult, but is getting aggressive. Finds his way to Toddy. Finds the damage. The Aegis is good, but not good enough. Echrome picks up the kill, and they get to the backliners.
Beautiful dive coming from Sap, and now it's the rest of Just F6 running for their lives. Mogao is going to be able to tank up this tower for as long as necessary for them to clean up these kills.
Yeah, they get 3 for 1. Cherio doing exactly what he was doing in game number 1. I will die, but you got to kill them for it. And now they're turning. You can see their eyes. Ecro, Mogao, Calvin running straight to a Fire Giant. Sap surprisingly looking for blood throughout all of that. Trying to find Worst Turtle, looking for another kill. Ultimately falls back with his team. Fire Giant slow but steady as she falls. And it's taken a while. I'll be honest with you, Aggro. It's taken a little longer than I thought it would. And with a good blink, no, kept in combat thanks to Mogao. things got a little more precarious than I think they would have liked there. For
Yes,
Joystick.
yeah, a little closer, but secured by Tail Whip, of course, of all things, to end up securing it. Look, Sap, so aggressive to start off that fight, comes in at a very weird angle, able to get a nice 2 off, but not in time to find the stun like he does here onto Worst Turtle. Transforms, but nice ultimate from Worst Turtle to taunt as soon as that transformation went off, and ends up Sap without being able to get the kill. And so Sap transformed immediately upon being pinned, and he transformed into Loki and ulted out right away. And I really thought that was going to be a decent fight for Just F6 because of that. I was surprised if Sap had transformed into Cthulhu right there. That is such a good initiation. I mean, he is right in the back line. Everyone's around him. He's got plenty of HP to work with. I think that really that could have gone even better for Joystick if Sap had been pre-selected onto the Cthulhu instead of the Loki. But Cherio really saves the play by getting a multi-man 2, which is huge in team fights. It's hard to track sometimes how valuable those can be, but getting damage reduction on multiple carries is massive. Then he got a pretty big stun off, forced some relics, forced some CC immunities, and then all of a sudden, Sap is de-transformed again and finds another really good angle, wiggled through a couple people, and found his way onto Toddy. So Sap really looking good on this Morrigan pick.
Now, let's give credit to the real carry. 4, 1, and 2. Calvin, of all people on the Sobek, has been picking up a lot of weight. Granted, it is on the hard work, as you had highlighted there from Cherry. Sap as well, with the beautiful angles in E-Chrome, getting some damage out there. This Fire Giant starting to put on its work as well. Tier 2 in left, Tier 2 in mid. Taken away, and Joystick starting to feel a little more comfortable with the gold lead they've amassed. Granted, they haven't gotten to spin any of it just yet. They're going to go for one more tower before they decide whether they're going to go for Phoenix or if they're going to fall back.
Sap's got his Rod of Tahuti. I mean, he's only going to get a Soul Gem from here in order to make himself a lot stronger. Maybe if Cherio can finish Heartseeker and Mogao could finish either Spirit Robe or Mantle of Discord, it might be worth it. But I don't mind them just pushing to try and end it here.
They're standing in position. Sap is actually, real Sap is over there in the mid lane. Fake Sap was hanging with his team. I'm just trying to push up those minion waves and make sure they have a little more pressure moving forward. Oni Fury minions going to help out. They're going to be able to walk in. Calvin blinks forward. Calvin eats a lot of his health bar. Calvin's just dead. Toddy with a great kill on the defense. A transformation from Rotwin. Maybe a little premature as Joystick just turn tail and run.
Not enough patience from Joystick because look at that left side. The minion wave is just crashing. That's partially an Oni wave. That could have put some pretty significant pressure on this Phoenix if they had just waited for that wave to go in. No reason to engage that early if you're Calvin. And it ends up being the siege killer for Joystick to lose their support in that way. Now he just backed and finished a full Spirit Robe, and that will help a lot because that Strife would have just given him some damage mitigation, and all of a sudden instead of getting one shot, he's going to be a lot tankier. So still feel like that play could work in the future, but a good play from Just F6 in order to punish Joystick for a bad initiation.
You called Calvin, well, I guess his play the Siege Killer. I thought the Siege Killer was Slash coming out later this year.
Ah, true. In some ways it is.
I'm excited for that.
Me too.
When it does actually release. I love Siege. I have a love-hate relationship with Clash depending on how the game is going.
I don't know about you, Gore, but I feel like my Clash games are longer than my Conquest games. Like
they can be, dude. They
take
get nuts.
Forever.
Not only that, but sometimes like it's genuine strain. Like it is some hard gameplay when you only have one tower to defend. It makes things a little more complicated. And right now, the complications are constantly arising for Joystick. They've got a good gold lead. You can see that translating now into the items ever so slightly. Ward coverage is going to be important. Each team had a lot of sentries and a lot of normal wards. I believe I just saw an Elixir power bot by E-Chrome, so he is absolutely happy to be where they are. And it's finished the animosity. Same thing for Toddy. They're pretty much going toe for toe in terms of blow for blow damage. And we'll get to see which one can make the big difference, especially depending on how this engage goes for the fight.
Not a big fan of these hunters upgrading into animosity. Just don't think it does enough.
Olastimic's plucked and jumps right on out of there. Sap is getting aggressive. Sap's not going to find the stun. Instead, it's the Strife turnaround from Hydraxin, but it's Mogao running him down. The cage is good, but it's only going to keep Mogao in there, and only for so long. Cthulhu ×2, Sap goes up, Sap goes down. Mogao barely stays alive. Cherio looks to go into the back line, doesn't find the kill onto Hydraxin instead. Hydraxin's the one who gets the kill. It's a 1 for 2. Toddy dies in the middle of it all, but they lose Cherio and Sap, and that loses a huge push for Joystick.
You see the difference in when Sap is trying to go down, right down Broadway with the stealth and try and close the gap that way, and when he can find these good angles in order to engage. Those are the better ones.
Well, Worst Turtle maybe overstays their welcome. Blink, pluck, kill. Echrome credit for that one pretty easily. Like that one was just clean.
Yep.
And so they're going to find themselves a 2 for 2 trade in the extended fight. Even flirt with the Fire Giant for a second, but ultimately not a good idea.
No, that's the right idea, to not go for Fire Giant, I should say, in that moment. But Worst Turtle had beads when he got plucked. Maybe he saw the teleport coming in from Mogao on the Tier 1 tower on right and realized he could get pinched, but I think he's probably out if he beads that Sobek pluck. Calvin continues to make it happen on this pick, man. If players aren't going to properly relic your charge prey, this god looks really, really OP.
Still has the Phantom online as of right now, too. So a good Odin Cage from Lostimics back on, or off cooldown, I should say. Might get countered out based on Calvin. I'm surprised it didn't come out last time. I believe Calvin was in that fray that was Mogao Calvin and Sap Cthulhu together. But ultimately, as mentioned, still available. And they're going to start the Fire Giant up. They're looking for the zone, just trying to bait out Justice 6 wherever and whenever they can.
It is enhanced now, but Rotwin walks in, gets plucked, still has his jump.
Now they're getting aggressive. What a great angle from Sap, gets immediately onto the mid laner. Hydraxin's out of here. Toddy's locked down in the cage from Sap himself. And now it's going to be the Odin jump. They're looking to take down the Artemis. A couple more hits from Mogao. Gets rid of the carries. Once again, the backliner's gone. Sap over the wall, gets rid of Rotwin, and now it's a 2v5 trying to defend.
And that's going to be it, man. They lose Worst Turtle as well. Lostimics, a cageless Odin, the only one standing between Joystick and the 2-0. I know myself, I was excited to watch Cherio play. I think I should have been excited to watch Sap play. He looked like the best player on the team here through this set.
Played incredibly well. Calvin had a lot of great setup plucks.
Yep.
And look, Joystick get it done here in game number 2. They seal the deal for the set in a 2-0. But it is not an easy fight for them. Just F6, again, different, completely different from game number 1, putting up way more of a fight.
Yeah, maybe just F6, like, whatever time they're waking up before their sets, like, wake up a bit earlier. You know, it takes it, like, they just seem a little, they're slow to start, a little sleepy game 1, and then they wake up and play much better game 2. Maybe, like, add a game in before your set or something like that. Let's change the practices so that we can play our game 2 game in game 1, and then maybe have a chance to win the set.
Maybe even take it 2-0, but unfortunately for Just F6, they're the ones that fall down once again today. Team Joystick stand above. We'll break down game number 2 and more right after this. A happy and elated Team Joystick guide their way to victory this time around. Game 1, pretty straightforward. They get a lead, they take the lead, they expand the lead, and then they win the game. Game 2, a lot more muddy waters for them to trudge through. They still end up taking down that Titan at the very end over just F6. But Aggro, they had a lot more struggles there in Game 2 than anticipated, and a lot of the times they won were really good through lines from Sap, where he's able to get to the back line with no opposition.
Exactly. Sap definitely impressed me a lot in this set, and particularly on this Morgan pick. His ability to pick his fights and get onto the right targets was really, really key in this game. The one thing that I think is worth noting here for Joystick, I mean, look, everyone is looking up at Elysium in this region, right? Like, that is the team that you have got to be able to beat if you want to be considered the best in Europe. Game 1, it looked like Joystick, like, yeah, maybe they could compete with a team like Elysium. Like, they were owning. Game 2, I think that they had a lot of trouble with their communication and who they were target selecting on and where they wanted to be in these team fights. And those are things that probably need to be cleaned up if they want to be able to take on a team like Elysium and Pandemonium and the Snake Hunters, those teams that were really good last phase over here in Europe. Not to say that they can't, because I'm sure they can, but those are the things that I'm going to be looking for as this team continues to mature and seeing where they're going to be there.
I mean, so many of these highlights starting with a really good stun. Like Sap, whether or not he lived through the engagement, they were still able to get back there and cause so much trouble. This was actually maybe my favorite play because we saw a lot of transformations that didn't result in much, but that Odin cage specifically at the very end was the biggest transformation that they had all game. 1 and 4 there for Cherio. Again, if you came out to watch specifically Cherio, well, maybe not exactly where your eyes were falling each time. Calvin, Sap, E-Chrome really standing out to me. Mogao had a pretty good game, 2-1 and 6, but you're Cthulhu, so everybody knows what you're trying to do. I would also give a lot of credit over there. Hydraxin might not be the mainstay mid laner for Just F6 and might not have had a good game 1, but game 2
much better.
Was definitely side of Joystick.
Much better. Discordia definitely, I mean, in this region seems to be pretty highly valued because Sap played it, looked very, very good at it. Now Hydroxin has a good game on it. And that team fight prowess that she brings, really, really strong in a region that likes to team fight. So it doesn't surprise me too much that Discordia starts to see some extra value.
Well, the good news is, well, maybe not so good news for Just F6. Unfortunately, they're 0 and 2 as now in the standings. The great news for Joystick is they are tied with what is the most difficult team to keep up with in the region, Team Joystick and Elysium, 2 and 0. We'll find out if Snake Hunters can join them in the 2-0 club or if Pandemonium can bring that to a 1-1. Not just a little bit later, but right after the SBL. So if you're tuning in now, SBL is going to be coming on relatively shortly. And then after that, even shorter maybe, it will be the jump right into Snake Hunters Pandemonium. And you had highlighted it. Well, tomorrow we're going to be watching Winter Dogs and Tiburones in the 11 a.m. SCC game. Afterward, who's Sturdy Artisans, it's these after SBL sets for the SCC that are really popping off.
Got to be checking it out. Some extra watch time for you this week potentially for good Smite games, but who's upset about that? Not me.
Oh man, more things to have up while I look, I like to put a stream on my second monitor. I know how it is. We're the side piece some days, but
Sometimes.
It's okay with that.
That's right.
Enjoy your games, you're queuing Conquest, you're slamming the queues, and then you look over and you watch some sick quadra kill happen or something like that. Makes things really interesting. Of course, as we stack it on after the SBL, it makes things even, like you said, longer, more engagement. Of course, SBL is going to be happening today. If you've already been in tune with this week, we've only had one 3-game set, the Dragons versus the Leviathans there on Thursday. Yesterday, surprise 2-0s, the Kings end the Bolts streak. I'm happy that those 2 in a row were the games of the week because it definitely made a lot more sense. Titans found themselves a good 2-0. Layers maybe getting to gloat over his former teammates, but today it's the Dragons versus the Valkyries as well as the Leviathans going up against the Warriors. Aggro, it's keeping things pretty interesting for us.
Should be some pretty good games. I mean, I'm really interested in that Leviathans-Warriors set. Again, if it's the Leviathans, if they're as good as we think they are, they should look very good against the Warriors here today. That's going to be a good measuring stick match for them.
Well, it's just a little over 30 minutes. That just enough time that if you're someone like me, I'm going to go grab lunch. I'm going to eat a little bit, get some re-enter in there. Of course, if you've already had lunch or depending on what time zone you're in, you can maybe queue a game real fast before the SBL starts back up. We'll be back incredibly shortly with the SBL right after this.